Hello and welcome to Wild Wisdom podcast. My name is Chelsea Bess Marie, or Elsie for short.
And I am Madison Murphy Barney, but you can call me Ed. Together, we are the Cedar Siblings. We are two-spirit indigenous folks who are endlessly interested in how we can apply the wisdom, creativity, and resilience of the natural world into our everyday lives.
We noticed that we spend a lot of time standing in two worlds as indigenous people, as two-spirit people, and also as professionals. This constant switching can be challenging in the best of times, but even more so in this moment.
This podcast is one of our attempts to not only do less code switching, but to bring our worlds closer together and in a balanced way that invites listeners to learn from the natural world as we take on this group project of collective survival and liberation.
Pretty cool. On each episode of this podcast, we focus on one species and their characteristics that can offer us guidance during the tumultuous times we live in. This week, we'll be learning from orb weaver spiders.
Before we begin our discussion of spiders, we want to remind you that you can support our work by joining our Patreon at Cedar Siblings and on Instagram, and we'd also love to hear from you via email at wildwisdompod@gmail.com.
All right. With that, we invite you to take a deep breath or take a moment to ground and cleanse, and away we go. All right. Relative today is grandmother spider, specifically orb weaver spiders. They belong to the family Aranidae. I'm going to have somebody pronunciation check me there, but one of the most diverse spider families. They have over 3,000 species worldwide. That's a lot. It's a lot of different orb weavers. There's a lot more spiders. Yeah. These spiders are best known for their intricate wheel-shaped webs. Orb weavers are found all over the world except for the Arctic and Antarctic. I don't blame them. I too hate the cold. And in North America, there are about 180 species of orb weaver spiders. Goodness, that's a tongue twister. Also, I just want to note that I love their webs and I love kind of seeing them at night, especially they will put webs up kind of underneath spotlights or, motion sensor lights outside because they're super smart. And they will just have a web full of all of the bugs trying to come, insects going to the light. And they do it in a beautiful way. So
it's a beautiful death trap. And I also love when it's really like a dewy morning or something and there's the dew coming off of the webs. It's so beautiful.
Love that too. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of their behaviors, colors, sizes, eyes, legs, all that good stuff before I jump into those in more detail. So orb weavers are non-aggressive and very docile. It's important to note. I have had to teach lots of kiddos to stop killing grandmothers. And so this is one we definitely want to not be bringing violence against. They're usually way more afraid of people than people are of them. And they're also super beneficial in keeping away other pests. So I'm always telling the kids when they're freaking out about the spiders, they're really helpful. Grandma's here just trying to help us keep the mosquitoes away, okay? Okay. They also, weavers specifically, have tons of different color patterns, and they're usually really bright and beautifully colored. In terms of size, they generally measure between about 2 and 30 millimeters long. So not super long, right? Their eyes are pretty similar to lots of other spiders. They have 8 of them and 2 horizontal rows of 4 eyes each. And then they also have hairy or spiny legs, generally, depending on what species we're talking about. Okay. So behaviors, web building specifically, they construct spiral wheel-shaped webs that are engineering marvels, as we already mentioned. They're usually built at night, which some people might not know, but you may notice as you're kind of coming into your house one day, there's not a web. You come out in the morning and there is a web. They often dismantle and rebuild the webs daily to maintain effectiveness and remove damaged sections. Again, you may or may not catch them, but a good time to see them is at night. And they're usually really full of insects, and that's why they may get damaged and may have to be completely removed or at least repaired before the next evening. The webs are constructed from a combination of both sticky and non-sticky silk, starting with a framework of non-sticky silk and then adding a final spiral of sticky silk, which is really strategically designed to trap the prey. So Think, poles with really sticky trap stuff scaffolded through those poles. They have a really great hunting strategy. So they're passive hunters. They rely on that web, which is why it's got to be really sticky webbing on the kind of final layer. They sit in the center usually, or sometimes on the kind of outskirts or periphery of the web, and they wait to feel vibrations on their web. And so that's kind of how they know they need to go and take care of an insect. They are also diurnal or nocturnal. So many are hunting mostly just during the night, and then they hide during the day. And then there are some species like the golden orb weaver that also are pretty active during the daylight as well. But by and large, mostly nocturnal. They also recycle their silk. So reduce, reuse, recycle. Thank you, orb weaver. They consume parts of their old web to recycle the proteins that are inside of the web. And that helps them conserve energy for the next web building session. So she's almost completely self-sustaining here. Mating behavior-wise, male orb weavers are significantly smaller than females and approach the females pretty cautiously for mating to avoid being mistaken for prey. And after mating, females lay eggs in a silk sac, often hidden near the web. Defense mechanisms include retreating or dropping from their webs if threatened. Again, they're more afraid of you than you are of them. And some species may exhibit some cryptic kind of coloration, blending into their environment for protection and trying to use that camouflage. In terms of habitat, the geographical range for orb weavers, again, they're found all over the world, from tropical rainforests to really temperate woodlands, grasslands, and even urban areas. So you're going to find these bad boys, again, pretty much anywhere except for where we also don't want to go, where it's very cold. Habitat selection, they prefer open spaces where they can anchor their webs between trees, shrubs, or man-made structures like fences and porches. They also like humid and sheltered environments so that their webs can kind of stay durable and there's lots of prey around. They also thrive in areas that have tons of flying insects, such as near lakes or rivers, other bodies of water, gardens, and forests. Again, by those floodlights outside of your house is also a really great space for them, and I see them there pretty often. They are really important and have lots of ecological relevance, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. So they control insect populations. Again, usually when their webs are flush with prey, I'm getting bitten by mosquitoes much less often. They prey on flies as well, so helping to kind of keep some of those grosser insects from coming around, and also agricultural pests too. I've seen webs kind of near the ground or close to the ground, and so some of those that are eating on plants might also get scooped up by these lovely ladies. And then their webs also provide microhabitats for other small organisms too. So playing a really similar role to the cedar in a lot of ways, in both helping to take care of different pests and also providing habitat for others. They're also an indicator species, so they indicate that there's a really healthy ecosystem around and that there's lots of insect prey. We also know, even though mosquitoes are annoying, mosquitoes and other pollinator insects are doing the work of making sure that all of our plants and all of our plants and trees and other things are getting pollinated. And so if there are enough insects around that there are orb weavers, we know that all of the pollination and kind of the life in that area is really healthy and happening abundant. And then in terms of human interaction in the ecosystem, again, they're harmless to humans, but they do play a pretty significant role in that natural pest control, mosquitoes, flies, other insects. And then they also have been really influential and inspirational to a lot of biomimetic research in material science and engineering. So really investigating both how their webs are built, but also the materials that they're built out of, really helping to give some insight into different engineering research that's happening. Lessons that we can learn are many, but I'm going to talk just about 10 different lessons that we can learn from them. So they're really efficient material producers. So again, I talked about how they kind of eat or like reabsorb the protein from the webs that they're getting rid of. And that helps to make them have more energy and be able to do better production for that. And so they also produce silk using kind of this high energy efficient process on a daily basis. There's tons that we can learn from their practices in different industries like manufacturing, or even food management, waste management, how we can kind of reabsorb and reuse some of the waste products or byproducts from our different manufacturing processes and practices. They also teach us a lot about adaptable design. So their webs, again, are repaired oftentimes if they can, and they're not discarded. They're eaten if they do need to be taken down. And that really teaches a lot of value about adaptive reuse, again, in the engineering and design field as well. So, how do we repair instead of building in, obsolescence into things, designing things to fail in many ways that don't necessarily need to have those design failures. Strength through structure is another lesson that we can learn from them. So the web strength is not just from the silk, but it's also from the architectural design. So it inspires a lot of improved construction methods and materials. Again, using those non-sticky pole webs to help make the basic construction or the foundation for the web, and using those stickier ones to do the other pieces of the construction. They're really energy efficient. So they use pretty, light energy to create the structures because of the way that they're reducing, reusing, and recycling. And that also maximizes their functionality as well. So they help us to think about how we can better be energy efficient systems for ourselves in how we kind of operate. And then they also teach us about modularity in systems. So their webs can be constructed incrementally, and that demonstrates the value of modularity in design. So again, they can construct bits and pieces of it, they can repair it, they can take some down and then reconstruct part of it. And so really thinking about how we can do bits and pieces at a time that can become a larger whole.
Basically, they walked so IKEA could run.
That's 1000%. If IKEA is not paying or Weaver Spiders right now royalties, then we need to have a discussion with them. I mean, we need to have a discussion with them about a lot of things, but we'll add this to the list.
We'll start with this to like make our sales pitch really enticing.
Yeah, and then we'll talk about who they're supporting and shouldn't be. The engineering is also really precise. So the silk's properties, the strength, the stickiness, the elasticity, all of those things are really tailored to the specific functions that the spider needs them to do. And that also provides some insight into us thinking more about custom material design rather than replicable, like mass produced material design. They also have really cool adhesion technology. So the sticky silk threads are things that can be researched and investigated so that we can really think about what are the mechanisms within the webbing itself that we might use for other adhesion technology, and is, I'm sure all over this right now. They also have self-healing materials. So the resilience of spider silk often offers ideas for creating self-healing materials for use in medical or industrial application. I know that spider silk is used already for lots of different applications. And again, just continuing to show how we can use it for other medical research and healing methods is really cool too. And then the tensile strength. The combination of strength and flexibility in spider silk is a model for next generation fibers and textiles and also aerospace. Again, she's teaching us how to go to Mars. I don't want to go to Mars, but she's got lessons.
But if you gotta go, you gotta go, and it's good to have someone that can show you the way.
Exactly, exactly. And then also spiders have, well, they're not building it for this necessarily. They give us a really great idea and model of safety nets. They have dragline silk and they use it as a lifeline both for themselves to drop from their webs or to other places, but they also have this like big web safety kind of net that they're using to catch things, not to make them safe later, but to, catch them from wherever they're falling. And it inspires a lot of safety and anchoring systems in engineering as well. So, what we can learn from just how they're falling down, where they're attaching before they do it, the angle that they're choosing, all of those things are really, really helpful.
Hmm.
Again, some of the applications that have come from the research around the spider silk specifically, medical sutures and biomedical materials have come out of research on the spider silk. Bulletproof materials have come out of this research as well, really lightweight bulletproof materials, robotics. So there's lots of kind of gripping and movement for smaller, softer robotics machines, I guess I'll call them,
What
that
can't she
have,
do?
I know, been
Space,
inspired by this.
robots, medicine.
I know. And again, it's a really environmentally friendly material and process for creating it. So studying spiders and their silk is just a treasure trove of lessons and research and information in resilience, in precision, and eco-friendly innovation, and high efficiency. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. In terms of cultural significance, I know in my Southeastern Chickasaw, Choctaw ancestry, we have the story of Grandmother Spider, and Grandmother Spider is kind of holding all sorts of different things in all of her different legs and is really significant. We have some really beautiful depictions of Grandmother Spider at the First Americans Museum here in Oklahoma City. And yeah, I'm wondering what the significance is in your ancestry, if you have any, for spiders.
Yeah, it's mostly them as like wise and wise beings and like the holding many things, but it mostly is just sort of like that wise presence of the spider. And I think this might be more my interpretation than cultural, but also the like sovereignty is I think has like in more current times and conversations about like indigenous sovereignty, we look to the spider in terms of like, she makes her home, it catches her food, she like eats the rest of it to make more of a home. Like, there's just so much of the like, I think, so many of our conversations when it comes to other species have been about interconnectedness and things like that. And like there's definitely this with the spider, but I think there's also this like really deep lesson of like sovereignty and being like whole unto oneself and like making sure that you're cared for and like weaving webs to care for yourself. And also the like lack of wasted energy, I think is like, a part of sovereignty as well. And that sticks out. So yeah, there's some cultural, and then I think there's some more like new age native cultural of just like the spider as a guide to like wholeness and sovereignty and caretaking.
Yeah. We also have a traditional story about Spider bringing fire.
Mm,
And so we also look at Spider as a kind of a model, an image of kind of even the smallest among us can do great things and
mm,
can bring like great gifts and resources. And it's seen as a symbol of we have a kind of tagline, if you will, that we're unconquered and unconquerable. We have
mm.
unconquered and unconquerable spirit. So the story about kind of grandmother spider bringing this fire to the people is also kind of tied to that understanding of, we can do and go through and experience all of these things and still be unconquerable and still bring fire and
Yeah.
still do things that seem like they should be way out of the sphere of what we should be able to accomplish.
And part of that for me also is like the mystery of the spider and of our people, but mostly the spider of like this sort of unknowableness of it. Like she's a wise grandmother, but also she's like there's, like I don't know, some associations with spiders are this really like sort of like chic, sleek being who like is unknowable in some way. And I always think that's just like such a vibe to just be like unknowable. And this is a word I can never say, but I love ungovernable. Like yeah. Yeah, so like you're saying unconquerable and unconquered, but there's this sort of just like I don't need anybody, and like Well, yes, we do. There's like at that core fundamental, knowing like I've got me all figured out for me is like, I think so much else becomes possible in our lives when we really feel that way about ourselves of like, I'm good. I'm an island unto myself in the sense that like I'll take care of my stuff. And like just that then creates a well we can pour from or like give from. But until we have that like spider baseline of like, I'll weave my web and care for myself, I just think it's very, I don't know, the spider in that way is sort of like this like chic, mysterious being who also is attributed to like, yeah, grandmother wisdom and like all this. And it's just like, yeah, again, like what can't she do?
Yeah, I have a couple of honorable mentions as well that hold the spider in significance. The Hopi consider grandmother spider to be a powerful deity,
Mm.
and the Zuni see her as a trans-dimensional guide. So big significance of all sorts of different kinds, but the common thread, see what I did there, is wisdom, I think, and kind of perseverance and kind of knowingness, as you're saying. And I wonder if some of that comes from just like the ingenuity and the artistry that I was talking about as I was doing the kind of overview of these orb weavers. The dedication to weaving her web
Mhm.
and to um I think of aunties that will mess up one part of a beaded earring, and then we'll just pull the whole thing out.
Hmm.
And anyways, I feel like in many ways that's what the orb weaver reminds me of like sometimes we need to take the whole web down. Sometimes we need to repair a piece, but regardless of what's going to happen, you bet your sweet ass I'm going to reuse that thread and all of
Hmm.
those beads are going to go into something. And so I just think that knowingness, like how much can we learn about the dedication to just honing a craft like over and over and over again and like repetition and becoming so intimately acquainted with what sticky web needs to go here and what pole needs to go there. And when I put my weight here, like, what does that feel like? And, there's just so much I think that can be said about the intimacy that she must have with that web and what that tells her about the world.
Right. And like that intimacy then leading her to that knowledge of like knowing when it's beyond repair and when it's just time to take down, digest. And like I think that's the most important part is like digest it and like let something new be built out of it. I think so often we get like fearful of like endings and beginnings and letting things be in a cycle. But like if we honor it in the way the spider does of like fully digesting it. It's time to just let go and then something new can be built. But like it can't be built if we're putting all of our energy and resources into fixing a web that no longer serves as a home for us. Yeah, I think it's just like something I'm always trying to learn of like when is it time like letting myself let go when it's time to let go and understanding that like there's a lot of lessons in the compost process and letting that be
So
true
many
rather than just like
lessons.
fighting against it because I will like fight against an end so hard and be like I can fix I can save it whatever and it's just like at what cost? Like, what is it blocking? Like, all the energy felt like spent like holding on and fixing is just blocking so much of it what wants to come into the world in our lives as we're trying to like hold up something janky and not let it like fully fall down so we can build something new and like in our individual lives and in our collective.
Yeah. Ooh, I feel like that's too close to home right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We need a new web
The discernment
desperately.
part and the digestion part. Like,
Yeah,
yeah, how does she know?
right,
It needs to go and when it just needs
right.
to be patched up, when it needs a lot of love and when it needs to be cannibalized,
Right.
you
Straight up
know?
eaten. And I too would feel very daunted, or I would feel more daunted than it seems like the spider does if I was like, damn, I gotta like take my whole house down and build a new one tomorrow. And like on a bigger scale, like we gotta take this whole system down and figure out how to build a new one. But like what if we did it like seamlessly and beautifully and like well designed and yeah, it's possible. And we know this because of spiders.
And we know it because of
And I kind
spiders.
of love how misunderstood she is, like in addition to the like wisdom and chicness and knowableness of just people like, again, we don't like the violence against spiders, but just sort of like people just like don't like have really strong feelings about spiders. And then when you think about like what they actually offer, it's just like, well, that makes sense. That would be like a feared force because that's like the force. Like what's more powerful than all of her like the powers that she has?
Yeah. I, not low key, very high key, High key. Love the folks that are doing content on TikTok and Instagram around jumping spiders that
Mm-hmm.
are, showing folks how loving spiders can be and, doing voiceovers for them and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's something that is really needed, right?
Yeah.
Because of what you're talking about. Folks have this disconnection from nature, and the spider is a wonderful kind of case study of that, I think, of nature that has been vilified. And right, fear is the biggest motivator. That's the way that we make people change their behavior, like one of the two things that make people change their behavior the most. And so I wonder how much of the fear of nature has been perpetuated, right, by colonial powers and by folks trying to create disconnection with nature. And so I really, really, really appreciate the creators that are bringing a like relative approach and really kind of like showing who they are
Mhm.
and how wonderful and beautiful and kind and personable spiders can be.
And I think it's on a personal level too, it's a reminder of like the things that we think are really scary about ourselves or like, bad or cast aside about ourselves or about others. It's like once brought into the light and given a little voice and a little love, you're like, oh, damn, like she could take us to Mars. I think like we are taught to not only fear spiders and like some of the most powerful species, but also the powerful things within ourselves. And when we like let spiders back in, we also let that back in of just being like, that's interesting about like an interesting thing about me. And then we realize like how deeply powerful it is and why it makes sense that like powerful systems would want us to like cast that power aside rather than embody it. And we can learn all of that so well from the spider.
100%.
Amazing. I mean, I feel like I'm like was already looking forward to, snow stopping to fall and like spring coming, but how it's like welcoming back the spiders will feel really good too.
Yeah, we have some cute ones roaming around our house, and we've done a lot of work, as I mentioned, around reframing spiders and them being relatives and them being welcome in the house and not throwing shoes at them and all of those kinds of things. We now at least have the kids are greeting grandmother and talking to her, at least when I'm in the room, you
Yeah.
know?
How many shoes are thrown the moment you go run errand?
Hopefully not. But yeah, now they're joking that they're going to get her a little house with a
Yeah.
bookshelf and some other
Some
things. So,
books.
in books, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. Our message to all of you is to similarly come to know and love the spiders in your home, the spiders in your psyche, the spiders in your society. And the more we integrate spiders, the freer we will be.
indeed,
All
indeed.
right.
And the more we lean into artistry and play and get really familiar with ourselves, really intimate with the webs that we weave,
Hmm.
the
That's the
better we
stuff.
can contribute to movement.
That's where it all is. All right. Talk to you all soon. Bye.
Bye.